can almost guarantee you that you have bulging discs in your low back, and maybe you don't even know about it. Did you know 30% of people in their 20s have bulging discs in their back, but no pain whatsoever? 1 in 3 people in their 20s. And that number obviously increases with each decade as life. 84% of people in their 80s have bulging discs and no pain whatsoever. So what's up with that? Why do our discs bulge? What does that mean and what is happening? And if it becomes painful, when does that happen? How do we know? And then the final question we want to answer is it reversible? Can you do anything about it? My name is Rob Drenning. I'm a physical therapist. You are about to learn the answer to all of those questions. In this video, we are going to learn everything about bulging discs. Before we learn why discs bulge, we need to understand what the discs in our spine are meant to do. So we have a disc in between every vertebra or every bone in our spine, and they're meant to be shock absorbers or cushions to absorb the force of gravity and just life. You have a disc between each bone, and when they're all working together, they can all absorb a tremendous amount of force. If you push straight down on a disc, studies have shown that they can tolerate 1,000 to 2,000 pounds of compressive force before the structure of the disc actually gets damaged. That's a lot of weight. It's not near the amount of weight that we put on our discs in just day-to-day life. So our discs are naturally very strong, very resilient structures, and they also move as we move. Think about it like a water balloon, for example. If you have a balloon full of water and you push straight down on it, the water pushes out across all sides of the balloon, and that force gets distributed pretty evenly. That's how our discs work too. Anytime there's any compressive force, the discs absorbs it by holding that tension all around the outer edge of the disc. Now when we move, we go forward. It would be like if you stepped on one end of that water balloon. What would happen to that water? It gets pushed out to the other side, or it makes the other side kind of bulge out. And then we remove our foot from that balloon and the water comes right back to the middle. That's normal in our discs. Our discs are very resilient structures. When the inner parts of it get moved to certain areas from various forces, they come right back and stay centered in the middle. That's how a normal, healthy disc works. They're very strong, very resilient, and they're meant to tolerate a lot of movement. So what happens when they bulge? What's really going on there, and what causes that in our day-to-day life? To get a visual of that, first I want you to think about cutting through a disc lengthwise. And if we were going to open it up like a book, almost like if you cut a tree and you look at the tree stump, you can see all the inner rings. That's how I want you to think about visualizing the disc for 1 minute. So if we think about opening that disc up like that and looking at it in the middle, we can see that the inside of the disc is made of this Play-Doh stuff. I'm going to draw that in red right here. That's what the inside of the disc is like. And around it, we have about 80 rings. They're called annular rings. They form that outer border, that outer part of the disc. Now we talked about how that Play-Doh material on the inside moves all around in there. But what happens over time is that we do things in our lives, for example, sitting, bending. We have a large force that comes from the front of the disc like that. It's just how our lives are. And what happens over time is that some of this inside material starts to get pushed out, and it kind of works its way through some of these inner rings of that annulus, and those inner rings will start to tear. As that happens, this material starts to move farther and farther out, and it causes more of a displacement than the back part of the disc, or a bulging type of sensation. Now, this process happens just throughout our lives. The inner 2/3 of this disc have no innervation to them whatsoever. So we don't feel this process happening whatsoever. It just happens with our day-to-day lives. We're bending, we're sitting, we're bending. Some of these rings back here start to get disrupted, and that inside nucleus material starts to push its way out and create this kind of bulging sensation right here. That's how a disc bulge happens. Now that can continue to progress and progress and progress until it gets into that outer rings right there, and then it can become painful. And that's why you hear stories all the time of a herniated disc by bending to pick up a pencil or something light. It was literally just the straw that broke the camel's back by the time this material had already gotten to those outer rings after basically a lifetime of just slowly working through all of those inner ones. Now, eventually this material can break all the way through, and then that's called a disc herniation or an extrusion. But when it stays contained inside the border of these rings, it's just called a disc bulge. I hope that makes sense, but that's what creates the disc bulge, and it's caused by an imbalance of forces in our day-to-day life. So, what do we need to do to get rid of it? Well, it's pretty simple. It's just rebalancing the forces. We need more forces that come that way. And as we do, that material, remember, it's like Play-Doh, it can kind of work its way back in there. These rings can kind of scar and heal up. And yes, disc bulges can go away. Disc herniations can go away. They've found this on MRI studies. Now, some bulging is just related to kind of natural wear and tear. They're not all going to be able to be taken away. But for the most part, it's something we can control by balancing the forces on the front of the spine and the forces on the back of the spine. I hope that drawing gives you at least a visualization of what's happening in our lives. And the things that contribute to that arrow in the front pushing that inner disc material towards the back is just our life. Everything we do pulls us forward. We're reaching for things in front of us. We're sitting. We're in the car driving to work. We're sitting at work. We're eating dinner. We're tired, so we watch TV. We bend to pick things up. Laundry, kids, toys, all of those things. It's forward, it's forward, it's forward. So over the time in our lives, that process happens and it creates disc bulges. Now, we just learned what causes that. We learned that they can be painful if they work their way into those outer layers or if it fully herniates. But now, how can we get rid of it? Some disc bulging happens because as we age, we lose water, which means the whole disc kind of flattens down and it bulges everywhere. That's just age-related changes that we can't fix. But the repetition of all the bending that creates that slow, gradual damage to the disc, that we can fix by rebalancing those two arrows. And how we do that is by introducing forces to the back in a controlled way that counteract all the forward bendings. We did a video on prone press-ups. It's a great way to start, just incorporating a movement that we don't often do into our backs and at any age. Remember, we heard that 30% of people in their 20s already have this process happening, but they're young and it doesn't show up until later. So starting to do some press-ups is a great way to introduce that other arrow and balance the forces around the disc. So please watch the video that we did that shows you how to safely do that and avoid common mistakes that can actually irritate your back. We also did another video on exercises that have been shown to hydrate your discs. They're very easy to do. They're not painful, they're not strenuous. So that would be something that I recommend incorporating as well, just for general disc health. So do those two things, rebalance those arrows, and minimize the effects that disc bulging has in your life. Let me know how it goes, questions, concerns that you have in the comments, and please keep watching for more tips and tricks for dealing with disc issues and low back pain.